and welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. So glad to have all of you with us. I'm Pastor Plek, and with me in studio is the one and only Adrienne Plekenpol, my sweet wife, and I'm so glad that you are here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah,
Finally invited.
No, you are always invited. We were supposed to record this about an hour and a half ago, but
can't be 10 minutes late for Chris.
That's right. We keep moving. Yeah. So I don't know if any of you out there have that issue with your wife, 2 cars for that specific reason.
10 minutes late is on time.
No, it's not. No. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today. It's something actually you may not be gifted at being on time, but you are gifted at having friends. And you have an incredible ability to put people in, I don't know, different categories is the right way to put this, but you're able to make your time, you prioritize your time really well with different people that really brings you and them a lot of life. I have a lot to learn from Adrienne, and so, I have learned a lot from you over the past 10 years, 11 years, and so grateful for you. And so I'd love for you to sort of share with us your methodology of prioritization of friends, because we talked about this, that you can have a lot of strangers, acquaintances, friends, and then you have fewer deep friends and even fewer forever friends. And so figuring out who the heck those people are and then finding out how to do time with them, that's hard. So talk to us about that.
All right. Well, all of this stuff that we're talking about today has come from a result of years of kind of trial and error. And also it has to be periodically reshuffled. And so while it kind of sounds a little bit formulaic, I feel like as we present today,
because when I think about you, I don't ever think of a formula.
Right. And so, but there is a pretty hardcore formula, but relationships don't fit in formulas very well. So you have to kind of hold that tension between both. I also got the specific example I want to share today, the strategy. Really, it's not an example, it's a strategy. I got from Cindy Hawks, who is the pastor's wife at Hill Country, where I grew up. And when I first came into this position at church, married to Chris, who was the lead pastor, it was a lot of pressure to prioritize well. And Cindy has always been excellent at like hitting me pretty hard with what I need, not necessarily what I want to hear, but what I need to hear. And so she presented this to me as a challenge to me. And I have found over time that she was really right about all of it. And I have tweaked it slightly for my own convictions and my own self, but in this system, there is a lot of surrender to kind of what I would prefer, and instead what I do believe that God's calling of me in my time, and that is a challenge that I got from Cindy through the Holy Spirit.
All right, yeah, so I feel like this is important because it's like, especially in people in ministry, and this really focuses us, I'm not saying that you have to be a pastor for this to apply to you, but you have a lot of people who are vying for your attention as a pastor, and rightfully so. This is what I'm here to do, is serve the community and serve the church. But sometimes it can be difficult to understand, especially if my first priority is my family, and then figuring out the priority after that, and then putting time to priority, or really making your actions match your values, is really difficult. So share with us how you do this.
So I think that this applies to everyone, but I think in my specific examples, you'll see kind of what makes, I think, a career in ministry does change some of these things. So starting out, the way to kind of visualize this is it's relationship, it's circles of priority. So we start with obviously really small circles, and then they grow as we list off different categories of friends and kind of how they're prioritized. So by the time we're on the outer ring, we're on our least prioritized in terms of time investment. So the first one is God, which is super cliche, I understand, and obvious, but this is actually often the first to go. And
right.
And God is in his own circle, because what can happen sometimes is if you view your relationship with your spouse or with your kids as the same level as your spiritual relationship, well, your house is full of a bunch of people that are going to pursue you and need you and be bombarding for your time. And the discipline that it takes to get away and to prioritize time spiritually is really challenging.
So let's talk about how, because we have 4 children that are very awesome.
Well, they're still young,
and challenging.
right? So they still
9,
need
7,
help.
5, and 3. So
Right.
talk to us. Let's talk through what your quiet time looks like.
So for me, this has been a lot of people. We hear a lot that time is the reason that people don't have time to spend with God, which is. I understand the argument. I understand the pushback, but it's like, it's just not an excuse. It's not a reason. So if you feel like time is your problem as to why you're not having time with God, you've just misidentified what your problem is.
Is that a place where you'd say you're self-deceived?
You're self-deceived. If you feel like time is your issue with why you don't have time for God, there's a self-deception, and that's probably a whole nother podcast, but I can tell you right now that you've got to figure out a way to make that your first circle and your highest priority circle. So for me, it's different for me, right? Because I don't work full time. And so I have always been able to kind of like have the luxury of spending some time in the morning where I do get up early, but my kids are up early and they've always been up early. There has never been a day in my life where I woke up at a time and my kids weren't up. Like, they can sleep until 6:30 every day, but then if I set an alarm for 5, they're up at 5. It just doesn't matter when I set it. And I don't understand that. I used to be angry at God for it, and I got over being mad at him for it. And I just embraced that if I'm going to get up at 4, there will be kid up at 4. And so I don't actually wake up early to spend time with God. That's just not, I hope to someday. Hasn't worked for me for 10 years. So instead I do wake up, and there's a kid up usually, and I go ahead and sometimes I'll go on a run and I'll leave the kid in front of the TV, but I will prioritize other things until my kids have all been fed breakfast. And after breakfast, and right now elementary school is so great because they're off at like 7:15. That's so wonderful. And so they're gone, and then I just have one left, and that is, for 10 years, my strategy has been, when breakfast is over, I put them in front of the TV. And with my first 2 kids, they didn't want to watch TV. They wanted me to play with them. And so I would tell them, like, this is my time to read my Bible. And so you can watch TV, or you can go figure out something by yourself, but you are not allowed to talk to me. You may not need water. You may not need a snack. You may not need to go outside. Like, there is nothing available from me during this time. And so I would find a place.
Do you ever feel like that was like mean?
No, I didn't. I felt like the most loving
like,
thing I can do for my kids is to spend time with God. And so, and for them to recognize that God comes as a priority over them, I think it was really important. And frankly, it didn't take very long to set that in habit. And so I also, in order to find time for God, I do have to do something called habit stacking, which is where you take something that you're going to for sure do, and you stack it to something that you're trying to do out of discipline. And so for me, that's like drinking coffee. Like, I don't drink coffee in the morning. So I would wait. I don't pour.
Do you have a t-shirt that says, "But first coffee"?
I don't. Nor would I wear one
That's
if
good.
somebody gave me one. But you know what?
You might be getting
just
several of those
fine.
now. Please give her some of those t-shirts.
But for me, this is like, I don't pour my coffee until I've hooked up the tea. Everyone's ready to go. I've set the stage for this is time that I'm going to get away and go to my bedroom, or I'm going to a dining room table. And I'm not spending long.
How long?
It will range from, I would say, 10 to 30 minutes. There are times when I don't have to be somewhere and the kids are occupied and I continue on in prayer.
And what are you doing? And what are you doing specifically?
But for the most part, we're talking like 10
I mean,
to
are you
20
reading the
minutes.
Bible?
So I do. I have gone through a lot of different things. So right now I'm reading through the Bible recap, and then I read a chapter of the actual Bible. But other times I have, for years, I would say for 8 years, I just did YouVersion devotionals on my phone. I would pick famous authors that I knew were credible theologically, and I would do Bible devotionals from YouVersion. And sometimes there were seasons where I would have to just go to the bathroom and like lock myself in and just ignore any crying or whining or fighting. Like, I ignore all of it during this time. And what I find is people figure themselves out during that
You have
time.
a real gift at ignoring your children. No, I mean, I mean in a true compliment. Because for me, I have a hard, and this is, you obviously know this since we live together, but I have a hard time ignoring them. And so for me, the only time I could ever get a quiet time is if I get alone with the Lord at 5 a.m. before they're all up, and then after they like get them off to school, or I do the like reading, my Bible reading, and then journaling before they're up or when they're not around, because usually, almost inevitably, they're going to ask me to do something, and
And you just don't say no.
I don't say no. I'm bad
But
at that.
you at 5 a.m. you often have someone with you in the room.
Yeah. For a long time, I had Titus just sitting there watching me pray, which
and that
was
worked for you.
Yeah, and I didn't mind. I didn't mind him sitting there staring because he wanted to watch a show, and I'd be like, no, it's too early because it'd be like 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd just sit there on the couch, and I said, Daddy's gonna be on my knees praying, and then I'd go read my Bible, and he'd just sit there and watch. Are you done yet, Daddy? No, not done yet. And we kind of.
And I think I have friends that have like trained their kids to early in the morning that it's not time, and I think that works. But I have absolutely no problem.
Yeah, you're
shutting the door and
You are gifted. In that.
But what I find is when I do. I mean, things work out. Things work out. They figure themselves out, and they have. I mean, we've brought 4
We've
kids.
had no major injuries during that time.
Yeah. And so anyway, that for me, and there are times I think where if something happened that morning and I wasn't able to make that time, almost never does that happen. But if it happens, then when I pull up wherever I'm going, I'm already late. I just am later. So I'm like 10 more minutes late. And I personally don't have a problem. So if I am like, it doesn't really matter what it is, whatever
Just
I'm
get
going
up
to that
earlier.
day.
Don't do that. All right. Anyway, sorry.
But I'll sit in my car. So like if I'm meeting a friend, I'll
Yeah.
let them know, hey, I'm behind, and I'll take 10 minutes and I'll sit in my car and I'll have this quiet time that I didn't make a priority earlier, because there's just no reason. There's absolutely no reason why time is ever the
Right.
problem and the hindrance to this. And I find that once the day gets rolling and once I'm engaging people, I'm further and further away from making a quiet time happen.
So if you're going to disappoint someone, disappoint your friend, not God.
Right.
I like that. That's really powerful. Okay, so then, all right, let's talk about.
So next circle.
Yeah.
So next circle would be kids and spouse. And so this is going to look
What
different.
about spouse then kids?
Yes, but they're in the same circle. So they're the
Yeah.
same. The spouse relationship is a priority over the children, but they're in the next circle. So
And
circles
oddly,
sometimes
our
share.
children have communicated that they understand that. Like, who do you love the most? I'm like, I love mommy most. And that to them was like, how could you say we're supposed to love us all the same? I was like, no, mommy's first. And that has been, and then they always read, you love mommy first, then it's us, and then it's me. It's interesting how they go through this order. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think, loving the most or prioritizing
Yeah,
the most.
right.
maybe
It's hard for
different.
them to differentiate between those things, but
But it is. I think it is important. And so the same thing goes. Like if you and I are talking and they're wanting something, it's no different than my quiet time of like, you're not the thing right now.
that's
And
hard for me too. Again, the
is.
kids interrupt me and God, and the kids interrupt you and me, and I have to do a way better job of like, you're great at like, get out of here.
It helps when you're with them all of the time. And so I think that helps.
But you are gifted at that. Okay, so you got phase 2. How long? Like when we talk about how much time do kids need?
I think that's hard, and I think it depends on the day, and I never will think I have nailed that. But I do believe that the younger they are, the more time they just demand, because you're meeting so many physical needs. And we're coming out of a stage where we're here right now, and they're in school right now. So
Pax
there's
is, like, right over
less
there.
time than we've ever had to give. But then I would assume as they get older, there'll be less and less time, and that will free us up. But for right now, that circle is kids and spouse, and there's so much demand between kids and spouse that it's the whole next circle. There isn't another relationship that can come into that ring.
And as a pastor in the early years, this was really hard for me, and Adrienne was really good at helping me understand this, is that you don't get this time back, and they're going to want to be with you during this time. And so you've really got to just double, because it's the hardest time. It's like the time when they're the least fun, because they scream all the time. But you're going to want to spend time with them when they're older and teenagers, and they got a whole lot of stuff going on. And so our hope, and this, we won't pretend like we figured this out, but our hope is that the investment we put in the early years will reap the reward if they'll want to spend time with us in their teenagers.
Mhm.
At least that's.
Well, and I think if you're always waiting for your kids to reach a point of being enjoyable, it will probably never happen. You got to learn how to enjoy them. But I also think you learn how to enjoy them in a way that you enjoy.
Mhm.
And that looks real different for you
Right.
versus me.
Yeah, I
you'll
like doing things with them. So if it's Austin, it's playing sports with him. If it's Jets, drawing. Titus and Pax pretty much are good with whatever. But, as they get older, their interests are going to vary. But I like to do things with them, which is, I guess that's what men do in general. We don't,
I feel like I'm not different, but you'll sit down and play card games.
That's right.
And you'll sit down and like watch a YouTube video
Of
on
ho-
drawing.
On drawing, right.
That's very, and I'll bring them, like we'll go on a hike together, or we'll go to the pool together, or we'll go, like I have to go bring
You have
them
to go
along on
somewhere.
something
Yeah.
that I'm enjoying myself.
Oh, that's interesting the way you put
Or
that.
I'll bring them, or I'll join them on the trampoline. But for the most part, I need to bring them along in something that I want to do.
Yeah. And that way you're not resentful of it and you can enjoy it yourself and then teach them to enjoy what you enjoy. Yeah.
Right. And you are great at just engaging them at home in something interesting to them. And so I think it doesn't matter how you do it. I just think it matters that you do it. So, and the spouse time, I think it does come before that, but you have to be strategic. And I think that there's times when my default is to like, I could create a world where the kids were never allowed to talk to us. So that's not healthy. So there needs to be a balance, right? There needs to be time for them. There needs to be, like, our conversation can't always be a dominating priority.
Yeah, I think that's where we've really had to, for us, because we talk to each other. Like Adrienne and I talk to each other as soon as I get home. We're having like a deep conversation, and there's all this chaos going around us. And then we're sitting at the dinner table, we're still talking. And so what we've really had to shift is like, so Austin, how was your day? Jet, what happened that was fun for you? Titus, what did you enjoy? Paxton, how was? And so then we got to pause our conversation because we love talking to each other. We are fun. We're really fun people.
And we can talk really loud and really fast and over all the chaos happening in the house. And that's really not great for the kids. So we've had to adjust some of that. And like I've had to kind of recognize that the kids are a higher priority in certain hours of the day, and that's okay. But anyway,
but showing the children that we do love each other, do love to talk to each other, I think it's important to know it.
Yeah, for sure. And they watch us go through plenty of conflict, which I think is healthy for them to see.
We are definitely a conflict in front of the kids couple. We restore relationship, we argue, we love each other, and then we show how to make up and say, I'm sorry. I think that's all, that whole process. That's just our technique. I know some people are like, they're going to go argue in the car or something, and their kids will never know how to argue. And it's fine. I just think that, and it might be even calmer that way.
Mm-hmm. I think our kids experience some stress as a result of that.
Absolutely. They've definitely gotten stressed by our arguing, but then they also get healed by our healing. So I think that's also helpful.
I think all of that is redeemed. I agree. Okay, next circle. So the third one now, we're in the third ring is, so this is tricky for me to label because I think every church has different labels, and I think even our church has different labels. And so I am lumping discipleship, community group, and accountability as one, which those are not often the same. And I think for me, I have been really strategic in the last couple of years as we did add more kids and the activities of the kids became a factor in our lives. I couldn't spread time I used to have an accountability relationship that was probably my deepest friendship on top of having a separate community group where there was no crossover with that accountability relationship, on top of having occasional discipleship groups. And I can absolutely not handle that's too much because all of those groups, I think biblically should be a high priority of time. And I didn't have a high priority to give to that vast.
Especially in the time of small children. I just want to reiterate that like the time of small children should be intentionally limited on, and I don't want to, man, this is where it gets dangerous. Like as a pastor, like don't do church stuff. But the reality is don't do church stuff if you need to spend more time with your smaller children who desperately need you to spend time with them. That becomes a really healthier, wise way to do life.
Or make it work. Figure out how to tweak the church thing so you are prioritizing both. And I think it took us a lot of years of trial and error, but I reached a point about 3 or 4 years ago where I was dragging our kids to childcare for us to go to community group when they had school. That was not working, and it was feeling like it felt like I was having to downplay too much a priority that I had for my kids. So our solution for that has worked for us is we have split into men and women community groups. Right. So we are each other's childcare for community groups, and we're not bringing the kids somewhere else. We're not adding another exposure in their lives because our kids' relationships are also kind of factored into these priorities, and sticking them in random small groups, especially because you and I were often changing small groups to kind of help leadership of new groups.
Right.
And so that was a chaotic situation that I didn't feel comfortable dragging them through anymore.
Right.
And so splitting that up has helped. But then for me, I have tied in, so my discipleship relationships, my personal accountability relationships are also people in my community group. So I have made those a 3-in-1, which really helps me, and it helps me feel way less stress and way more enjoyment relationally, because it's not too hard to prioritize those people, and because they're not competing. Once I've made sure that like we are good and my kids have had my time, those are the only competing factors for these friends.
Right.
And that's really doable. And that feels like I'm able to love them well. And so like yesterday, one of them was really sick. And I was like, man, I have no problem offering to kind of drop everything else I have today to go maybe pick up her kids and take them for the afternoon, because I have enough bandwidth that I can move the things I was going to do today to a different day. And I can do that. But if I'm trying to do that for 20 people in different pockets of that doesn't work, and it's so stressful. So that's really, really helped me. And so the key here is kind of doubling and tripling the categories that friends are falling into.
Especially when you have small children. Because I think that becomes just such I don't want to say a hindrance is the wrong word, but because you need to spend so much time with your children, then fewer people that you go deeper with becomes almost
And there's
required.
some strategy in making sure some of those friends have kids that are my kids' ages, to where I can get together with them with our kids.
Right, because you can do like a community group you can do like discipleship meeting, or a meeting where you go deeper if you have your kids are playing with each other, and that gives you space to talk.
Right. And if my kids know, my kids' closest friends at church are the children of these moms that are in these crossover relationships. And that happens because we need it, like we need that to work.
And talk about this real quick, just how important it is for you to do the work of finding friends for your children.
So I think that when they're really young, I think it is important to put your children around kids who are being raised with similar values and similar discipline strategies. I think that's important. And I think if you want your kids to have friends who value the things of God, there is a level of involvement that you have in that. But man, we all know that just because our close friend is going to church with us, that doesn't mean that what's happening at home or the training is matching. And so I don't necessarily think that all of those details matter, but I think it does matter that you have some common values. And for me, it has mattered to have friendships work for the kids.
Right.
And I think also to say, like, I prayed for this for probably 4 or 5 years before it happened. And so what happened in the past is I only had one relationship, and I couldn't get them to cross over. Like I wasn't able to get accountability, wasn't able to also be in my community group. There was spouses involved and family dynamics involved. And so I wasn't able to merge those things together. And that was harder. And I prayed and prayed, because I felt like I've always felt like my time was very divided, and that I was doing a poor job loving people as well as I wanted to love them, because I was spread too far. But that was, I think, God's will for me in that season was to be spread far.
Right.
And I'm really grateful that after several years of praying, He's aligned some of these priorities, which this brings me to that next circle that we have.
Yeah, so circle 1, God. Circle 2, kids and spouse. Circle 3, accountability, discipleship, community group.
Right. And so then circle 4, now this is where I think we get ministry, working out in a church stuff. This is where this gets specific to that. But I think but ministry co-laborers is my next category. So ministry co-laborers are a high priority relationally for me. And so this would be elders' wives, this would be pastors' wives, this would be people that we're on staff with.
Right.
These also, for me, like I'm in children's ministry. That's my job right now. So that means children's ministry volunteers are knocked up higher in my time priority. And so anyone that that falls in the category of a co-laborer in ministry is now the 4th circle, which if you look at this list, that's a high priority.
Right.
In that same shared circle is extended family.
What does that mean?
So extended family is our parents. Our parents sometimes pop down into the level of community group accountability, depending on the season. But extended family would be like our...
Because both of my dad's passed away. My mom lives in town, and her parents live in town. So that adds an extra layer.
Yeah. It does.
And plus your grandparents live in town.
Right. So, but I would still say for the most part, like if my grandparents are wanting us to hang out with them, though that priority is coming after I have prioritized meeting that week with my community group, right? So I think that's appropriate. Like I'm meeting weekly with my community group, who's my also accountability and discipleship. But then I'm meeting with grandparents maybe monthly, or I'm seeing my parents, where maybe we're having dinner with them twice a month. So it's a slightly less demand on my time. And then this would also be where I would put in, like, if my sister was to come into town, well, man, she's gonna bump real close into my priorities. I'm not gonna drop my closest accountability relationships, but I'm gonna drop everything else to make sure that I've got time for her to come in. So there's a space for that in this like fourth ring. And so this is where when Cindy shared this with me years ago, she was like, Adrienne, you really need to work as hard as you can to make sure your fun friends are ministry co-laborers with you. And that was like, that stuck for me because it's true. And like, you want to know where this really took effect for me was, I think it was 3 years at the women's retreat. 3 years ago, I had probably my 4 closest girlfriends that were actually in charge of the women's retreat. And I wasn't. I was there helping, but I was not able to be on the planning team. And so, but I stayed at the end of the Friday night event. I decided I would stay and help clean up. And I looked around the room and I was like, what's happening right now? These are all my closest friends. And it kind of hit me that like my closest friendships are the same people that are putting this entire retreat on. And we end up, and it wasn't like we had this like secretive powwow. There was a few extra people that were there. Like there was probably 2 or 3 women that were also there helping serve, clean up. Yeah. But we ended up like doing rolly chair races across the room. And like we ended up staying there for like 3 hours and we had this really fun time. And I was like, this is what it looks like when you can like stack up a ministry co-laborer to a fun friend. Like, man, it maximizes the effectiveness of ministry 100-fold. Right. Because we were all really excited to be there. We were excited to hang out with each other. What we're doing to foster our deep relationships is blessing this entire effort to put off a women's retreat. I feel the same way currently in same exact thing happened to me my first Sunday of running children's ministry. It was my first Sunday where I was trying out this new rotation system. Right. And it was kind of risky and we didn't know if it was going to work. And
we brought PE and dodgeball into the children's ministry.
We did. And we had a storyteller position and like there was just a lot of things. And I did not train everyone. Like it was kind of like, here's the plan, let's go. And I look like in the middle of the Sunday, everything was working and it felt fun and it felt exciting. And I looked around and I'm like, I had 4 people at that time in my discipleship group. All 4 of those girls were back there. Right. One was telling the story. One was like, had a whistle and was keeping the kids all rotating on time. One was back with a classroom. And I was like, and it was just mind blowing to me. I was like, this is it. Like, this is what happens. So that would be an example of me stacking. I stacked discipleship with ministry co-laborers with fun friends. Because if you'll notice, we haven't hit on, fun friends haven't yet made it into a priority circle yet.
Yeah, I'll talk about define what fun friends means in a second.
So like, these are my fun friends who are not a high priority for my time, who are actually getting they're getting like triple teamed with other priorities. And it makes ministry, I think it really makes it effective. And it's I think the way it's supposed to be. I think that's how it's supposed to go, but it takes so much intentionality and it takes a lot of finding and praying for friends with common values and common disciplines, because that doesn't just happen. So anyway, that is like, that's the fruit, I really believe, of years and years of praying and God blessing the desire for kind of monopolizing, taking one relationship and monopolizing all over. So then so we have ministry co-laborers, extended families is that one circle. So then above that circle.
Or around.
Sorry, I wish I should have typed this out for you. I was told to do that.
We can show you right here, her little diagram. See if I can zoom in. Is this possible?
It was really not.
No, that was.
I didn't really do circles very well.
Oh my gosh, right there.
Are you doing it?
Yeah, we're just gonna you have to tell Cody. Cody, can you look at this one right here? Is that possible? There you go. Let's see if Cody can get on it.
It's like chicken scratch.
It's not chicken
tiny
scratch.
Black pen.
Am I able to do the black magic camera over here or no?
I think we should just keep moving.
No. He's gonna bring it. He's gonna make the magic happen. This is where.
You want me to hold it up?
Yeah, just go hold it up. Go show them all.
You can't read it. Listen,
right, well,
how about at the end we'll make a comment with circle priorities.
Perfect.
So after we have ministry co-laborers, extended family, we have lifelong friends and lost friends. So this is a tricky circle because I would say that these relationships become a priority in a pretty big range. And so lost friends would be people that don't know Christ that are in our lives that we're connecting with and that we're enjoying. And so we meet them, their parents, sometimes of kids on our sports teams, sometimes they're people that live in our neighborhood, sometimes they're people that came to our church. But however we have run across them, they're people that fit into our family structure of relationships. So they typically have kids our kids' ages, or maybe they worked out with me. Maybe we were in a gym class together, but somehow they were fitting naturally into our life. But here we're prioritizing them pretty high. And this is also where I would stick in lifelong friends. So lifelong friends, I see lifelong friends maybe once every 2 years, but they become like that one time.
They're the people that you start the conversation. It feels like you just pick up right where you left.
Yeah, and some of mine aren't local, some of them are local, but if they're getting together or if one of them is coming in town, they're bumping up pretty high in my priority. They're coming after our marriage, they're coming after our kids, they're coming after our discipleship, they're coming after our co-laborers, but they are fitting in there. I'm fitting those people in this week because they're here today. And so that is the same level of priorities that I'm also trying to fit in lost people, because if we're not trying to prioritize lost relationships, it's not going to happen. It's too convenient to like never make time for them.
Right.
And so those have to reach a higher priority. Then outside of that circle, the circle further out then is fun friends. So, and here's what stinks about this. It's fun friends at the church, okay? Because there's fun friends that don't go to the church. So fun friends at the church that I'm not in a co-laborer with in ministry. They're not partnering with me in a ministry that we're doing together. They're not partnering with you. Because a co-laborer for you, it becomes a co-laborer for me if we're hanging out as couples or as families. So if they're not falling into either one of those categories, then they're just not a super high priority for me. I often really super like them, and I really want to spend more time with them, but they have to come when it's appropriate, and that's a harder. Because
you just have to spend time with your co-laborers because they need time with you to know your ministry.
To do our job, right. And so that's a reality that's not fun for me, but it is. But like this is where we find ways. Like we have a camping trip coming up. They'll be there. They'll be at the women's retreat, right? So I often have to rely on things that the church is doing to run across these friends.
Yeah.
So then outside of fun friends at the church are fun friends not at the church that are Christians. So if you're a Christian that doesn't come to our church, man, that's a hard priority. If you're not a lifelong friend and you're a Christian and you're not here, it just feels for me, it feels like that's a time investment that I might super enjoy, but it's not wise for me to really invest a lot of time there because there's so much fruit coming from these other relationships that are closer and into priorities. And so this is what I mean earlier when I say I don't always like this system, but I really do believe that it's valuable, and I believe that God blesses our efforts to be intentional with our time and with our relationships, and I think it blesses our ministry, which is a huge priority in our lives. So so this would be like a Christian neighbor is kind of in this category. Also like parents of our kids' friends who we really like, who are believers, who go to another church. Man, like we might really love them. Like there's several moms at the preschool that all go to different churches around close to us, and I love them, and they would be really fun friends for me, and I might even like some of them so much that I would want to bring them into like a community group discipleship relationship, but it doesn't make sense to stick them that close into my prioritization of time when they're invested elsewhere in other relationships in another place of worship.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, because Adrienne, I think the hard part for some people listening is they're like, well, that's nice for you. You have all these friends. But what about me? I don't have all those friends. And so do you still think it's wise to have these circles for people that don't have a ton of friends?
Right. So I would say, first of all, these aren't necessarily all I'm using friend pretty lightly, right?
Right.
These are acquaintances for the most part. Some of these are relationships, but these aren't all like best friends.
Right.
Second of all, if you feel like you don't have friends, it is quite possible that this prioritization will fix that.
Yeah.
Because it probably means you're investing time, you're wasting some time in relationship investments where you are lacking common value, you're lacking common purpose, and your time just kind of goes to a void. And I felt this back when I was a high school teacher before we were close.
Right.
And if there was a Friday night that I didn't have a date, I always felt kind of sorry for myself. And I had a small group of girls that I could have texted and I could have planned something with them. But I was at my high school teaching, realizing I had no plans, and I would go next door to, the other Spanish teacher's classroom, and I would ask them what they were doing that night, and I would kind of get invited on their plans. And so I would spend most of my weekends with my coworkers, which I don't think that wasn't a bad use of time. Coworkers are great people to get relationally closer to, but I wasn't being strategic. I didn't have common values with them. I wasn't, like, there was nothing life-changing happening in my life because of those relationships. Now, they were lost friends, so I was being intentional. But after a few hangouts with them, I was like, okay, Adrienne, like, you're not being intentional spiritually with them anymore. Like, you've kind of hit a standstill where you've shared the gospel. They've kind of let you know where they stand. They're not real receptive. You're being more influenced by their lifestyle than they are by yours.
Right.
And like, you have this group of girls at church that are available. Like, there needs to be some strategy and some discipline in forcing myself. Because frankly, I didn't really want to go sit in one of their apartments and have a game night. I wanted to go downtown to some new fun club where they had dancing or they had something that was going to be fun and different. Like, I kind of wanted that experience. And that wasn't where my time should have been going. That was wasted time that then made me feel isolated more at my church. And it was my fault. It wasn't because I wasn't a victim of these people. You're going to be friends with the people that you are making yourself available to and that you're pursuing. And if there's not intentionality in it, time is lost. And I think sometimes it means sacrificing what you would rather do.
Right.
And that's hard. I would rather go have like a fun night out because I felt sad for myself. Or sometimes, a lot of time, actually, I prioritize going to a workout class over spending time with a friend. And I don't think that's always wrong, but I've gone through seasons where I have to force myself. Like this week it happened.
Here we go.
On Tuesday, I had friends getting together, and you know what? They were also ministry co-laborers. Some of them were also in my community group. And it took everything for me not to go, well, I have a class then. I was like, nope, I'm going to miss that class today, and I'm going to go be with these friends because this priority is higher, and I need to submit to this, even though I actually would rather just be in my exercise class during this time. And God bless that, and I'm so grateful, and I had a fun time with them, and I never, ever regret spending the time to prioritize the relationships that I've intentionally set as a priority, but sometimes I don't feel like it, and I think...
So why do you think people don't? Why do you think people... Like, they sort of complain they don't have any friends, but they don't set the priorities to go and make it happen?
It requires intentionality. It's the same reason you don't have a quiet time. It's the same reason. You haven't really figured out, like, the kids come in, they're yelling, they're needing stuff, or your phone's going off, or there was something fun on social media that led to 5 other fun videos. And, like, it's the same reason that we're not doing a lot of it. It's the same reason your floors aren't mopped. It's the same reason your van is dirty. It's like, we're just not being intentional about what we're not setting forward in actions that like align with what we most desire. We're we're responding to whatever is like in front of us or whatever in the moment feels urgent. And
that's good.
Gosh, I think you can waste your life relationally if you don't really get strategic with people and pray strategically. I think that there's one thing that God has blessed me in my life with, and that is answering prayers for friends. In high school, I had this incredible group of Christian friends. And at the end of our senior year, we
still hang out with them.
We do. They're my lifelong friends, right? That like bump into my priorities twice a year. And I think that when we kind of had like a graduation ceremony at the end of high school, and everyone was kind of tearful sharing. This was a co-ed group. It wasn't just girls. It was a co-ed group of friends, and they all shared how they had intentionally prayed their freshman year of high school that God would give them Christian friends because all of them felt kind of out of place and lonely freshman year. And if you knew these people freshman year, they didn't look out of place or lonely, but they were. And God answered a prayer by bringing us to each other. And you know what's funny is I was like the only person sitting there that was like, I didn't even think to pray for that. Like I was just I was a relationship responder at that stage.
Yeah, talk to real quick, relationship responder and what that means. Because I think there's a lot of people that are victims and they don't have real friends because they're just putting out fires for the crisis people.
So a relationship responder is someone that is, I think, they're a yes to anyone that asks them to spend time, and they're also being intentional, whether they realize it or not, with people that they haven't actually chosen to prioritize. So these are the people that like they're out front with I think you can sometimes be this.
Oh yeah, I totally respond to whatever.
So if Chris is having a great conversation with someone, he's ready to go make Friday night plans with them. And he's not thinking like, gosh, we don't have very many Friday nights. This is an opportunity for our entire family to connect, or this is an opportunity for a date night. He's in the moment having a fun conversation with the AC guy. So he's just made Friday night plans with the AC guy that we have no values with, that we're not overlapping in life at all. And he's just like, this sounds fun. Let's take this to dinner. Why don't we come? And there's nothing wrong with that. You just don't have the luxury of that when you have a family. And when you're wanting deeper relationships and you don't have time for them.
Yeah, I've had to shut down a lot of that and just really focus on the family in this season. Like I said, again, I do believe it is a season, but also with the priority levels of just like lost, that would kind of fall into the lost person friend. Like there are plenty of lost people who don't know Jesus everywhere. And so for me, my Tuesday night group, I've just kind of created, like I can invite the AC guy to my Tuesday night group to kind of double up that, because I love meeting with people who don't know Jesus. Well, my community group's a perfect place for that, and which is probably why it's grown.
And this is in fact, our lives are, I think, a perfect example of how our personalities are very different. And I desperately need really, really deep relationships where I say a lot of stuff that probably shouldn't leave my mouth. And I need friends that can handle that. They can handle processing with me. They can push back on me. And if I don't have a safe place for that, I really, really struggle emotionally.
Right.
And you don't have a huge super need for that. Chris instead has a big need for all of the people that he's having feel-good connections with, which is a lot of people. He needs a place to invite all of them.
Yep.
And so instead of filling up our dinners every night of the week, which is what he kind of used to ask to do, he's bringing all of these people to his men's group. To a dinner at his house. Instead of dragging their whole families to try to like mesh with ours at a time that doesn't work, he's just taking these individuals and he has a spot now to invite them all. And so he can be intentional with them, and it's built into his week. So it's built in as a super high priority, but it's never forcing the priority of our family or our marriage, because it's intentionally set.
Yep.
And that's been a life-changing freedom. And then it creates, like, I feel like I'm supporting you with your men's group, and you feel like I'm respecting that desire, instead of what used to be like a huge battle of us both feeling like the other person wasn't valuing things well. And I think it's unrealistic to assume that you and your spouse are going to value relationships the same. I also think, going back to responding for just a second, I think sometimes there's situations where you really wish that you were someone else's priority. Like, you really desire that there's this person over here that you like a lot and you respect a lot, and you wish that you were a higher priority for them, and you're just not. That's hard. And that happens to me more than I feel like people would ever realize. It happens. And I think that when I experience that, what that is there's a lesson in contentment there. If God desired that friend for me, he would make that possible. So I'm going to ask God, I'm going to tell God that I really desire this friendship to be a priority in my life. I really wish this person had time for me, and I'm going to ask God for that. But then I'm going to be open to what God might have for me instead.
Sounds like great dating advice as well.
But yes, that is good dating advice. But I'm going to be open to what God might have instead for me that actually might be better for me. Because the truth of the matter is, someone that you really respect, that you think is fun, that doesn't have the time for you that you wish they had, probably it's not someone that would end up being all that life-giving for you. And someone life-giving for you might be someone that you need to commit to and choose to pursue and choose to prioritize. And like, that could end up being a way more life-giving relationship than you think. And so I do believe that there is a spiritual element here of finding contentment in the people who are available and who are at a stage where it's working, because it takes a mutual. It takes it to mutually work out.
Yeah, that's good. So I feel like we've kind of covered that, and I feel like you got all. It's really 7 rings. First is God. Second is kids. Third is accountability, discipleship, community groups. Fourth is ministry, co-laborers, and extended family. Fifth is lifelong friends and people who are far from God. 6 is fun friends at the church, and 7 is Christian neighbors and
parents of kids' friends, fun friends that aren't crossing over in your life anywhere else.
Right. So I feel like if we'll post in the comments a link to a picture of that, and Adrienne will be like showing it, the ones she just drew in her notebook. But I really do appreciate that, Adrienne. Thanks for coming on the show. And listen, if you have any questions, just text us at 737-231-0605, or just go to pastorplek.com and leave a message for us there. We would love to connect with you. So from our house to yours, have an awesome